During the years that I was gone away from the gospel, on my prodigal journey, having distanced myself from our Heavenly Father and Christ and His church, my skeptical side really kicked in, and I developed some doubts, some serious doubts about those things which are most basic to our belief, specifically, doubts about the existence of God. And when I made my return and began striving to get back on the covenant path, I had to deal with that skeptical side of me and those doubts. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I am DG Hamblin, and this is Feasting on the Word.
It's good. Feast on the word just like I should. Still of morning light.
Welcome back. Before we jump into the video, I want to remind you of the upcoming Book of Mormon Evidence Conference being held this Thursday, Friday, and Saturday in Sandy, Utah at the Salt Lake Community College. I will be speaking along with a host of other people. One of those is my good friend Troy Abels over at The Last Dispensation. If you haven't checked out his channel, you ought to do so. He is really good at what he does, and I love the material that he brings and the take that he has on various gospel topics. Now, to the point at hand, on my journey back from my prodigal straying, as I said a minute ago, I had to deal with the skeptical side of me and the doubts which I had developed about those things which are most basic to our belief, a belief in God. And the first thing that I did to overcome the skepticism was what we all ought to do, and I prayed. In fact, it was a simple prayer, one from a primary song. If you're familiar with the child's prayer, I remember thinking that I could do no more than pray the first verse of that song and ask, Heavenly Father, are you really there? And do you hear and answer every child's prayer? And in response, I had one of the most spiritual experiences and a very strong spiritual confirmation that, yes, indeed, my Father in heaven lives. He is real and He loves me. However, I still had the skeptical part of me, which had had years to gain strength, and I wanted to put it to rest for good. And so I prayed again, and this time I prayed that I would have some type of evidence given to me. I wasn't looking for a sign. I believed. In fact, I felt a lot like the Father in the book of Mark. I want to say it's about chapter 9. I could be wrong, but President Holland did a talk about this, about the Father who was seeking healing from Christ for his son who was possessed and would have these fits, something like a seizure or something. And Christ told him that all things are possible to him who believes. And the Father, in response, cried out, Lord, I believe, help thou mine unbelief. So this was kind of how I felt. I believed, but I wanted to put the skeptical side of me to bed. And so I prayed and asked my Heavenly Father once again to provide me with some reassurance, with something that would strengthen my faith and rid me of the skepticism which I had developed. And of course, He came through. What happened is that a video surfaced in my YouTube feed, one which I love. And this video, I believe it's put on by the Hoover Institution on their YouTube channel. And the title is something like mathematical challenges to Darwin's theory of evolution or something like that. Now, I'm going to play a clip of this video for you. And it's a few minutes long, but it, to me, was the real crux of the entire argument for me, the part which resonated with me and put everything to rest. The other arguments they make are also excellent. But this is a mathematical challenge directly. They're talking about proteins and the amino acids which make up proteins. This sounds boring, but I promise the video's not boring, so don't go away. And the statistical probability of being able to create a protein or having a protein spontaneously created by chance. Now, here's the video, and we'll be right back to talk about it.
Somebody give me some notion of the math here. Things are more complicated than Darwin knew. We understand that producing new forms of life now means not just new shapes, new activities in which life engages, but a prior code. Or is that fair? You're the man who knows code.
You know, the mathematical element of this, not of population genetics in the complex, sophisticated, predictive sense that Steve was referring to, but just the simple issue of the code. It is remarkable for young people to learn in high school. It's remarkable for me or in elementary school to learn that proteins, molecules are assembled because there are codes. There are codes in the nucleus of cells that spell them out, character by character, codon by codon. This codon means this amino acid, and the next one means that, and the next one means that. But the mathematics underlying these codons is very simple, and Darwin could perfectly well have understood if he had the facts. Each one of these positions has to be occupied by one of 20 amino acids. Okay, so you pick one of 20 guys for this position, and one of 20 guys for this position.
You talk about visualizing a string of beads.
Yeah, like a string of beads.
As you're building a protein. Yeah.
Right, so you have 4 different colored beads, roughly?
I'm building a protein out of amino acids.
Yes.
And I'm doing it by choosing the amino acids one by one by one by one by one.
Yes.
And I have 20 choices each time. Now, if there are several hundred of these things in the string, in the bead, in the necklace, it's a big necklace that wraps around your neck 18 times. So there are several hundred, or 5 times, whatever it is. That's a huge number of possible choices. The number of ways in which you can arrange the emerald followed by the ruby, followed by the opal, followed by the chunk of platinum, and another ruby, and a diamond, and a aquamarine. The number of ways you can arrange that is huge, grows exponentially as the string gets longer. So even when the string is short, even if it's a cheap necklace for your very first girlfriend, and it's all you can afford, it's still, there's an astronomical number of choices. And Darwin could easily have computed that. He just didn't know about the amino acids. He didn't know about the necklace. He didn't know about the string. It's not the mathematics that stumped him. It's the biology. The mathematics is simple. A high school student can compute how many choices there are if there are 20 gems for position number 1 and 20 gems for position number 2, and you have 60 gems altogether.
And the task here, let me.
It's 20 to the 60.
Try to mute. So I'm quoting from your.
Even you can.
Even I got it.
You got it right.
Even mathematicians can understand it.
David Belinsky has a memorable phrase
Go ahead.
to describe this mathematical problem. He calls it the problem of combinatorial inflation.
Yes.
As the required length of the protein molecule grows, the numbers grow exponentially. They inflate exponentially, and so the odds of a random search finding the one that makes the pretty necklace, to use David's metaphor, drop precipitously.
And in this huge, unimaginably vast universe of possible combinations, the number of combinations that would produce a useful protein is what?
Exceedingly rare. Exceedingly rare. And this is what we didn't know until just the last couple decades. There was an extraordinary conference in the 1960s held by, convened by a number of MIT scientists, some of whom David knew very well, Murray Eden, Marco Schussenberger. And they were the first to see the mathematical problem with Darwinism. They called it, their conference was called Mathematical Challenges to Neo-Darwinism. But at the time, they could compute the number of possible arrangements, but they didn't know at the time how many of the arrangements would result in functional proteins that would do a job in the cell. And so they didn't know, they couldn't exactly measure how hard the search would be on a random basis. Especially the computer scientists, Murray Eden and others, knew that based on computer science, if this is functioning like a true linguistic system, it's unlikely that you can do a random search and find a meaningful string of characters in DNA that will produce a meaningful protein.
Okay.
But people didn't know in the 1960s. By early 2000s, there have been a number of different experimental measures of the rarity of the functional genes and proteins versus all the gibberish sequences.
Right.
And for a short, for example, just one result, for a short protein 150 amino acids long, the ratio is one protein that will fold into a functional structure compared to 10 to the 77th gibberish sequences. So the ratio of functional to non-functional is 1 over 10 to the 77th power.
Okay, so functioning proteins are extremely rare. It's very hard to imagine random mutations leading to functional proteins, except that, and here I quote Dr. Galanter again, but the theory understands that mutations are rare, and successful ones even scarcer. Darwinism knows this. To balance that out, there are many organisms and a staggering immensity of time. Your chances of winning might be infinitesimal, but if you play the game often enough, you win in the end. Correct?
That's the
And
theory.
that's the question. Do you play it often enough? There's always an often enough, and the question is, does the history of life with which Darwin was concerned allow you enough chances to make it at all probable, let's say, or even possible that you'll hit on one, statistically, that you'll hit on one of those amazingly rare necklaces that folds up into a protein that can be stuck in a cell and actually doing anything. I'm not a biologist, and so I look at this and say, yeah, sure, there's enough time. You know, there's been a lot of creatures on Earth, and life has gone on for a long time, but when biologists look at this and try and nail it down and figure it out. Try and make a guess. Try and use heuristics to make a guess, like using the number of total bacterial lifetime as a measure of the number of total mutations we're playing with. The point is, from whatever angle you come at it, the answer is no, there has not been enough time. The number of throws we've had is too puny even to talk about. It doesn't even approach puniness, and certainly is nowhere near reasonable. So we would get that if we had a reasonable time, but we don't. We didn't. We haven't.
So let me just be very explicit from my little Winnie the Pooh bear-sized mind. You are saying that Darwin is unlikely it's unlikely that species arose the way Darwin said, or you are saying it is impossible. Darwin was just mystic, lovely man, beautiful idea.
There's hardly a difference. There's hardly a difference. Unlikely, impossible. We're talking about odds that are so prohibitive. If you wish to say it's impossible, fine. I'll defend you saying it's impossible. If you wish to say it's highly unlikely, I'll be in your corner as defense attorney as well. But there's no practical difference. We've known about these things for hundreds of years.
Right?
You get 1 million monkeys at 1 million typewriters, all of them typing at random. We know they're not going to produce the collected works of Shakespeare in anything like a reasonable amount of time. It's like that wonderful episode of The Simpsons. Do you remember it? Mr. Burns has 1 million monkeys typing at 1 million typewriters. They're going to produce the greatest novel ever written. He pulls out one sheet of paper and says, it was the best of times, it was the blurst of times.
It was the best of times, it was the blurst of times, you stupid monkey!
Stupid monkey.
Or to put the discussion down even lower, the Jim Carrey film, where he's trying to get a date with a young lady he fancies, and she tells him to go away. He says, well, what are the odds? A girl like me and a guy like you could get together. Not good. And he says, what do you mean, not good? Like 1 in 100? And she says, like 1 in a million. And then he says, but if there's a chance.
So you're telling me there's a chance? Yeah! I read you.
Here's a precise way
Yes.
of cashing out this probabilistic argument. If you have 1 over 10 to the 77th power is your ratio, but then you have if every organism in the history of the planet, and we can estimate that, about 10 to the 40th organisms. So you divide
Bacteria, little tiny things, everything, every mosquito, every bacterium.
Yeah, every time one of those replicates, there's a possibility for a mutation that could search the space of possibilities. So you got 10 to the 40th possible mutations against a search space 10 to the 77th strong.
Right.
So if you do your exponential math, you end up with, what it means is you can search 1 10 trillion trillionth of the possible combinations. So in that case, are you more likely to succeed or fail? You're overwhelmingly more likely to fail to find one of the functional combinations, even taking into account every organism that's lived on Earth. And that means that the Darwinian hypothesis is overwhelmingly more likely to be false than true.
It just didn't happen. Okay.
Well, what do you think of the video? For me, when I saw this, it showed me the reality of the requirement for a creator of all things. And I was reminded of Alma chapter 30 and the exchange between Korihor and Alma. Korihor, of course, was an antichrist and did not believe in God, or so he thought. And in verse 43 of Alma 30, I'm going to pick it up there. And now Korihor said unto Alma, if thou wilt show me a sign that I may be convinced that there is a God, yea, show unto me that he hath power, and then will I be convinced of the truth of thy words. But Alma said unto him, thou hast had signs enough. Will ye tempt your God? Will ye say, show unto me a sign when ye have the testimony of all these thy brethren, and also all the holy prophets? The scriptures are laid before thee, yea, and all things denote that there is a God. Yea, even the earth and all things that are upon the face of it, yea, and its motion, yea, and also all the planets which move in their regular form, do witness that there is a supreme creator. I echo those words. That video, although of course not produced by anything from the church, did a lot to strengthen my testimony. There is a God above. We are his children. He created this world and everything on it for a purpose. And for that purpose, we're here so that we can learn and grow to be more like him and live as he commands us to live. And have faith in his son, Jesus Christ, his only begotten son. And make sacred covenants that we can overcome this mortality and not only live forever, but live forever with him and hopefully with one another. I love y'all. I hope this video helps somebody out there strengthen their testimony that God lives and that he loves us. I'll see y'all again real soon. Don't forget to spend a little time at least every day feeding your soul by feasting on the word.